What are the languages that you've studied?
I can only learn languages that are spoken by a very small number of people or are dying.
Oh.
Spanish I'm hopeless with. French I'm hopeless with. I think it's a level of interest.
Do you have a family, Larry?
By family you mean offspring? I have a son who's now in Sweden from the time I was living in Iceland. He's studying, he may be a doctor. Let's see, this was his 4th year in med school.
Have you been married?
No, perish the thought.
Okay.
Why get married? You know, if you study birds, you'll find that only the dumbest birds mate for life.
Really?
That's interesting.
Look at corvids. You know, crows about 2 or 3 years, and then they go on to the next partner.
I did not know that.
Is that true?
Ravens.
They do?
Yeah.
What about doves, though? Now, they're dumb?
Geese, Canada geese.
They're
some,
dumb?
yeah. Well, they're not.
They mate for life?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
The way that hunters have been, you know, and actually Inuit hunters have done this, and Cree hunters, they'll kill a goose, and then they'll lay it out so it's perfectly obvious, so its mate will come to mourn for it, and then will be shot too. And that, in a way, is very, what shall we say, humane, because you don't want this mourning goose. We've got mourning
But do they
doves,
do it
mourning
for that
doves.
reason? But they don't do it for that reason, though.
They do it to eat it.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
But now that we have
I'm
time to
kidding.
think about it.
I'm kidding.
Oh,
Yes.
well,
of course.
But you know, they're not. You know, you don't see these Canada geese dressed in black.
What are your views about the killing of the seals and things like that?
The killing of the seals off Labrador. Which killing of the seals
off
do you mean?
Labrador. You
The
know,
baby-
the one that's
the
brought
baby
on
seals
so
he's
much.
talking
The baby
about.
seals.
The baby
Harp
seals.
seals.
Yeah.
Oh, you should have. I brought a shirt that says "I Club Baby Seals." And it's a club. Owing to the band, they have regained the numbers that they might have lost, and they are not. No one will tell you they're endangered. And I would have to say that my views, let's say, while not against it, I'm not in favor of it, but I'm distinctly not against what Greenlanders do, which are kill adult seals, eat the meat, and use the furs for their garb.
Sure.
But that's a little different from clubbing baby seals.
What about eating whales?
I love whales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and living in Iceland, they love it too.
Yeah, falkjot. No, I've eaten about 7 or 8 different species of whale, and the muktuk or matak, which is the blubber, and it's one of my favorite foods. You know, especially you take the muktuk and gently saute it and rub a little soy sauce over it. Utterly delicious.
When I was in Iceland, I had the rotten shark.
Oh, haukar.
Hakarl.
Haukar.
Yeah.
Hakar.
Do you like that?
I love it.
Man, does that take a serious...
Everybody I know who's
You gotta
going to
tell
Iceland.
people how it's made.
All right. Well, this is Greenland shark, and
Right, it's a Greenland shark.
yeah, and sharks have no urinary outlet.
Right.
They release their waste through the pores of their skin. What happens then is if you eat a fresh shark, it's going to be like eating solid ammonia.
Right.
So they bury it in the ground for a certain period of time in order to reduce this. It's a couple of months, but in the ground is more or less the same as in a gravel pit. They're not putting it in dirt. They're putting it in a gravel pit. Then they bring it out, and if you want really seasoned haukart, you hang up that strip of meat in the wind so it gets a little dry for a certain period of time, and then you eat it, and preferably eating it while you're drinking what's called Brennivin,
Right.
which is white Black Death. They call it black because it's got a black label. It's a kind of aquavit.
You must have stories like that.
He's got
We
a
could be-
story. He did a story in Outside Magazine about being caught on a little island up in the Arctic with Inuit, and the little engine broke down, and they had to take the engine apart. Tell some of that story.
Well, the engine broke down in the middle of an unmapped area, and no flyovers of planes and nothing like that, no emergency devices. no icebergs, and we had to row to the nearest landfall, which was an island that wasn't on our maps. And there we stayed for a certain number of days, and I suppose the fact that I'm here suggests that I survived. But what I recommend is that instead of telling you how I survived, which is an intriguing story, that your viewers go out post haste and buy a copy of the book where I describe this, which is entitled Lost in the Arctic.
That was the name of the book?
Yes.
Oh, so you wrote a book solely about this adventure?
No, it was about other people lost in the Arctic too, or
cool.
lost in one way or another.
As you're getting older, or for
I,
better
I
word,
would have to admit I have, but it's partially the fault of editors because it's harder and harder to get an assignment to do the sort of thing. Peter and I have been talking about this ad nauseum. Harder and harder to get an assignment of the sort that I could get in the old days where an editor says, hey, go up to the Arctic and write about it and bring home a good story. Now they say, go up to the Arctic and we want you to have this and this and this experience and eat that food, this food, and bed down 2 Inuit girls so you can write about it. Not they don't say that specifically, but they tell you specific things. I could tell you horror stories. That's why I was telling someone this morning that you know, my writing hasn't declined in quantity. I mean, the reason I'm not producing as much as I used to is not because I don't have much to produce. It's because it's harder and harder to get an assignment.
right.
And there are fewer and fewer good editors. You know, instead what you get are 20-somethings who've just graduated from Wellesley and may not even be the brightest lights in the firmament of their graduating class, but they know how to use a computer and they know about sales and they know what sells because all their friends are reading the same schlock, so they're trying to sign on that schlock.
Right. Yeah. And it becomes one.
Well, one of the problems
all about
is
money.
one of the types of stories that they do now is like the 20 best spa hotels
Right.
in northern Montana. Now, that type of story, you've got like 2 or 3 paragraphs for each stupid little entry. You don't get any depth in any of these things.
Right.
Nothing to the extent that he's doing with natural history, history, language, none of that. They just can't. No one can deal with it. No one has the attention span.
It's true. And the internet is one of the main culprits because it is inspiring a diminished attention span. Mm-hmm. You know, you get your little bite-sized tidbit of information on the internet, and you get you adjust so much to that when there's this 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 word story, you look at it and you shake your head and it's beyond you. Instead, you want, well, I just want to read about 50 weekend destinations within 50 miles of my home. Now,
50. The newspapers,
sad,
the
but
magazines, they're all doing this.
they're all
this
the same.
story.
And if you look at like the 3 magazines I used to write for, Men's Journal, Outside, and National Geographic Adventure, the covers are all the same. You know, it's a cute chick or a surfer dude. And, you know, the headlines for the articles are, you know, just like 50, you know, as Peter was saying, 50 boutique spas close to my home, you know, or 20 short hikes close to my home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And,
really wants the adventure,
you know, it's
they're not.
like, you know, we've reached the end of the literary world and computers, which are to blame, in my mind, for so much. Short attention spans, the fact that people aren't outdoors, aren't doing something. Instead, their eyes are glued to some sort of screen, giant cyclopean eye. They're, I think, affecting the literary world. People can't read anymore. Or what they're reading is this fluff that ends up at the New York Times bestseller list. And someone like Peter or me end up being totally marginalized. You know, he paints people's houses and I lead mushroom walks. 20 years ago, we were doing all sorts of travel writing for all sorts of magazines in all sorts of places.